Welcome back to the Vandy 24/7 podcast brought to you by Butler Holdings. He's Brandon Bigsby. I'm Alaina Morris. We're here in Memorial with the Hawkins Field in the background, but we're here after Vanderbilt's 76-61 loss to Ole Miss. The number 23 Commodores had their 4-game winning streak snapped. Brandon, just really tough day for the Commodores, and you were feeling it when we were talking to Shea Ralph after that one. She just did not like the effort all around.
Yeah, that was not a happy coach, to say the least, was Shea Ralph. And, it's hard to blame her. Obviously, this is the one team on Vanderbilt's schedule that you played twice. They lost that game, I believe it was 59-87 in Oxford. So I think the hope is you kind of learn from some of that, and you come into this game on your home floor. You're coming off a big win against Florida. You're ranked in the top 25. I think the hope is you kind of come in, you learn some of those lessons, and apply them. Instead, it felt like Vanderbilt kind of went back to some of those same habits that we saw bite them in some of those losses against games like Ole Miss, Kentucky, Michigan State, and you kind of just felt it from Shea Ralph. There was one quote that she said during the presser that really kind of stuck out to me. She said, it's either one or two things when you're talking about kids. Either you don't know how to do it or you just don't want to do it. And when she said that, she was referring just to the effort that her team has and the focus that her team has. And we kind of saw some of that dip at some points, and this is going to be one that I think stings for Vanderbilt, especially considering that, again, all of that positive momentum, it felt like after that Ole Miss game, things really turned around positively for this team, and you kind of stumbled back to some of those old habits that have been you in the past.
Yeah, just a tough game. It felt like, from the get-go, it was going to be a slugfest, 12-11 to end the first quarter. Ole Miss with a 1-point lead, but Vanderbilt just really couldn't get their shots falling, especially in that first half. At halftime, the Commodores went into halftime shooting 28%. Just not a good look all around. This is a team who normally likes to shoot the 3-ball. They were 2 of 9 on the day. I mean, they didn't even hit double digits in attempts, and that's just very uncharacteristic from the team that we've seen this year. And so, like you said, it's either they don't want to listen or they just don't want to do it. And it felt like today Vanderbilt just didn't want to do it effort-wise. Star Jacobs, I mean, we talked to her after the game. She was complimentary of Khamil Pierre, who had a very bright spot today, 24 points and 7 rebounds after really struggling, which Shea Ralph did talk about and we'll talk about too. But Star Jacobs only missed one basket all day. I think she was 12 for 13 from the field with 24 points and a double-double. I mean, she was just getting everything she wanted to in the paint, and that's where the lack of effort was showing up. I think that Shea Ralph alluded to, I believe, more than half, I believe 50 of their 76 points, something, a large number of
64 to 76, I think is what she said.
Of their points were in the paint, and so that's what she was very unhappy about. And she was like, okay, so why are they getting inside? That was the lack of effort today, and I don't know the exact number, but she made sure to put an emphasis on it was quite a few of their points, and so I think that that's going to be a big focus, but really tough to see the momentum in the way it did in a game that just never feel like Vanderbilt really had a great chance in.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you talked about Star Jacobs, Madison Scott as well, was somebody that pretty much made a living on the inside, and it was really apparent in the second half, Atlanta, but it felt like Vanderbilt started to kind of adjust a little bit to the drive. Ole Miss was making a lot of their money just driving inside, and they were able to get Vanderbilt to fight on a lot of those pump fakes, which was kind of surprising because Ole Miss, they only shot 12 threes. They only hit 2 of them, so the 3 wasn't really a threat, but Vanderbilt kept kind of trying to jump forward, trying to defend that 3. They would drive right past them. And then it felt like when Vanderbilt adjusted to that, they would get that miss at the rim, but they wouldn't be able to grab the rebound. It just felt like a lot of those loose balls, a lot of those effort plays that Shea Ralph was talking about, Vanderbilt just really didn't show up for consistently. And you kind of see that from the numbers with the 2 bigs of Ole Miss and Star Jacobs and Madison Scott having the big game. I mean, in Oxford, it was Todd Williams that had 27 or 28 points, and she get 5 or 6 threes. I mean, I don't know the exact numbers, but she had 8 points today. That's all she had. So 20 less points than what she had in the first game. Ole Miss was just able to kind of just out-physical and out-hustle and out-effort Vanderbilt throughout a lot of this game. You saw it on the defensive end, you saw it on the offensive end. I think you could really tell after the game that that's what Shea Ralph was really disappointed. Not just the fact that you lost this game, but how they lost and the effort that they showed throughout a lot of things.
I think we found a new spot for our rapid reactions, the concourse with all the stats right in front of us. We appreciate that. Unfortunately, we don't have all the numbers, clearly. But, I mean, that's the thing is, she touched on, I don't like to lose, but I hate when, you kind of shoot yourself in the foot like the way they did today. When you don't give your full effort for 40 minutes, it's going to be tough to win ball games, especially against a very physical team like Ole Miss is. She touched on that. I mean, Ole Miss likes to get up in your face, make you uncomfortable, and one point she made too is she felt like her team didn't move the ball around very well. It kind of stuck to their hands. They put it on the floor. They weren't screening, and so just kind of got stuck on offense and then just let things go by on defense was just the recipe for disaster. Vanderbilt got down by 20 at one point, made it look a little bit more respectable with a final score of 76-61. But by all means, just not Vanderbilt's best day, and it's going to be tough heading into Austin this week where they play at Texas, who's just been a dominant team all year.
Yeah, and also a Texas team that is just as physical as Ole Miss is as well. And Shea Ralph even mentioned that. She said, this is what you're going to get in the SEC. You know, you can talk about matchups and players and this, that, and the other, but any team you play in this conference is going to be physical, and you have to be ready and be prepared for that. And something else I thought that was really interesting too is she kind of talked about some of the foul calls, and not necessarily that, oh, you know, the officiating missed these fouls. She said her team can do some things, control getting some of those calls, making sure that you're running and being active in order to force the officials to blow that whistle. And again, you talk about some of the lack of movement, the lack of effort, the lack of activity. Typically you think of defense, you think of rebounding. It can make your life a little bit easier on the offensive end as well, and some of that lack of movement is some of the reason that we kind of did see things get a little bit stagnant. You saw Ole Miss create 18 Vanderbilt turnovers against a Vanderbilt team that's top 50 in turnovers. They only average a little over 13. So just some of those little things that Shea Ralph talked about, you really saw show up. And again, I don't know if one or two of those things being fixed changes a 15-point deficit. I'll be honest, I kind of feel like maybe Ole Miss and Vanderbilt, it's not a favorable matchup for Vanderbilt necessarily. You've seen it twice, and a lot of those same issues with the physicality has kind of shown up, but effort does trump a lot of that. And it just feels like the effort for Vanderbilt, at least on a consistent basis, wasn't always there. It bit them, unfortunately, today.
Yeah, it was really tough when Michaela Blakes picked up her third foul to start the second quarter, and, you know, talking to Shea after the game, she was like, it's not really fair that we have to rely on Michaela for multiple quarters. We should be able to give her a break. We should be able to let other people score, and we should still play well without her on the floor. And so, you know, she feels bad. I don't want to say feels bad, but just feels like it shouldn't, all the responsibility shouldn't be on Michaela. And so that was another point she kind of made. It's like, okay, just because Michaela's out of the game doesn't mean that we can't compete, because we saw them compete against Tennessee when she missed almost the entirety of the third quarter or second quarter with some foul trouble against the Lady Vols. So, I mean, Vanderbilt is capable of doing it, but Ole Miss just really attacked the weaknesses, attacked the lack of effort today. But one thing, you know, as a positive takeaway from this, Khamil Pierre, I mean, she only had 3 points the last game against Florida. Just a really tough shooting night for her. In Gainesville, had a tough shooting night in Tuscaloosa, but today, 24 points on 11 of 18 shooting, 7 rebounds. That's the Khamil Pierre that we've seen this year, that Vanderbilt fans have seen this year, and so that was definitely a positive from this game. And I think that one thing that really stuck out too is Shea Ralph was talking about how coachable she's been this last week and asking, how do I get better? What do I need to do to get back to the production I'm used to? And I'm sure that's music to coaches' ears, but that was definitely a positive thing to take away from this game, is getting her back on a roll, especially heading into Texas when that matchup between Madison Booker and Khamil Pierre is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and you know, give Khamil Pierre a lot of credit, because I think it's easy to forget that she's just a sophomore. Khamil Pierre is still a very young player, just is kind of being thrusted into this star role with a lot of responsibility. This is a player that last year was, you know, kind of the sixth man off the bench and kind of would come in and give you spurts. It wasn't always consistent. So this is the first time she's really been in this situation where not only does she have to kind of work her way out of the slump, but her working her way out of that slump is really critical to this Vanderbilt team's success. She has a lot of responsibility on her shoulders. For her to have gone from being 5 for 29 her last 2 games against Alabama and Florida to playing really, really well against a big physical Ole Miss team where you're matching up with Star Jacobs and Madison Scott pretty much throughout the entire game. Really, really impressive bounce back. And something else that Shea Ralph said that really stood out to me is just talking about how much Khamil Pierre has grown. That's a big teller in how much she's grown. The fact that she was able to kind of bounce back from 2 really rough games, and was a quick turnaround too. That was only 3 days ago, that Florida game where she went 1 for 10. She turned it around, got things back going, and like you said, looked like the Khamil Pierre that we've been used to seeing consistently throughout the season. So maybe a tough loss for Vanderbilt, some negatives that they're going to point out, but that is a positive and a really, really good sign to see for the Commodores coming down this really tough stretch.
Most definitely, especially heading into Texas on Thursday. But that'll wrap it up for our rapid reaction. Final score, Ole Miss 76, Vanderbilt 61. The Commodores moved to 18-5, and they end their 4-game winning streak. For Brandon Bigsby and myself, my name is Alaina Morris. We appreciate all of you guys supporting Vandy 24/7, and we'll talk to you soon.